Good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Clayton, and I am a senior manager at MNP working out of our Cambridge office. MNP is a leading national accounting, tax, and business consulting firm in Canada. We proudly serve and respond to the needs of our clients in the public, private, and not-for-profit sector. Through partner-led engagements, we provide a collaborative, cost-effective approach to doing business and personalizing strategies to help organizations succeed across the country and around the world. This morning, I am pleased to welcome Blair Lafter. Blair has worked in the credit and collection field for over 23 years. He has trained over 300 collection agents, registered a agency under ISO 2701, and worked with a number of companies as a partner and advisor to help them build a better business. He has tried to treat customers that owes debt with respect and courtesy, and helping them to remove them from collections and a better financial situation. Please help me welcome Blair. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, it is still morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to chat about credit and collections and how things might have changed in the last little while. My name is Blair DeMarco Wettlaufer. Actually, that bio, I should probably update it. I'm more like 30 years in collections now. And when I started as credit manager, and then I moved into collections. And back in the day, we had rotary phones, and we called people, and the phones were bolted to a wall somewhere. And the world has changed significantly, and people's behavior has changed significantly. Rather than calling a consumer who feels morally obligated to answer the phone because every phone in the house is ringing, now you call someone on their cell phone, they see a toll-free number they don't recognize, they swipe right or set their phone to vibrate only and put it upside down. So things have changed significantly. So I've got a couple things that we're going to go through. But the first thing I'd like to do, the first poll question, I'd like to know from our audience, for you folks, how many of you are doing credit or collections with businesses, consumers, or both? Because obviously businesses and consumers react differently to collection efforts. I'll give everyone a chance to answer that, and I'm going to try to set up my screen to share. There we go. Okay, a bit of split of both. So I'll try to, in this presentation, address both consumer behavior and commercial behavior. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the internet is very, very big, and how that impacts the world today. By the way, as I go on, if anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to put something in the chat box. I certainly don't want to just be a talking head for the next hour. Definitely, I want questions and input and feedback from you folks. So the internet is not this one big thing. It is a series of 4.3 billion IP addresses. And each of those IP addresses is directed, you end up directing to it through typing a website. So, fuzzykittenmittens.com isn't really fuzzymittenkittens.com. It's 198.64.28.5. Google is 8.8.8.8. And the website, the internet is built from all these different servers of different sizes. And then you end up with Google or a search engine or Bing, and they scrape all these 4.3 billion sites. So when you type something into a search engine, it finds you your site. The larger the site, the more powerful the servers, the bigger the audience, the more relevant the website, the higher results you get with that. The important thing to remember as we're going through talking about credit and collections is the internet is huge. The internet is 4.3 billion servers and 4.3 billion buildings, and it never forgets. So the next survey I've got for you folks is, when's the last time you Googled your own company or your own name? Because when you these search engines, the way they work, they do something called SEO, search engine optimization. And if you when I started a collections blog, receivableaccounts.com. And the reason I started it is I Googled my own name back in 2010, and it was awful. I had been in collections for a long time. So when you searched Blair Wetlaufer, you found out that I ate babies. I was a horrible human being. And obviously, I don't believe I'm that sort of person, but collections, people get emotional, people get stressed when they're called for collections. So obviously, I was not everyone's favorite person. So I started a blog with the idea of, let's take all those horrible, nasty consumer sites and push them to page 3 of Google. That's not actually what happened. Something better happened, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But the important thing is, you need to know who's having a conversation about your company or your collection department or your billing process, and you need to be part of the conversation. And you can't do that unless you actually search out and see what's on the internet and who's having a conversation about you. And you can do it through keywords. So you can search, Acme Widgets disputes, Acme Widgets collections, Acme Widgets Google complaints. All sorts of things will come into this. Now, obviously, certain sites are ranked higher. So odds are, whether you know it or not, you have a Google business rating and a Google map location. And obviously, Google is currently, it's a verb. We don't say we're going to Bing something. And if you, so Google obviously is going to be widely used, and they're going to give preference to their own websites. So Google Maps is preferred by Google. So if you search Collection Agency Alberta, you're going to end up with a side panel on Google talking about, here are all the collection agencies in Alberta, and here are the little pins, and here are their reviews. And they're going to rank them by positive reviews or negative reviews. How do we do on that poll? I'm going to flip back here. Okay, not bad. Okay, so you guys are looking somewhat at your footprint, and that's great. Okay. Let's talk about digital footprints. The internet doesn't forget. Everything that you say and do affects you. Now, the good news is that happens with your consumers as well, and your customers. So when you're doing collections, ideally, collection agencies see things, unfortunately, at the end. Hindsight is 20/20. We will often see information sent to collections. The customer signed up 4 years ago. They went delinquent 1 year ago. We get the account. And when we get the account, we can see that occasionally the original creditor hasn't, they're sending over the information from when the customer signed up 4 years prior. They haven't updated their information. So this information isn't just for your internal collection process, it's also for onboarding customers or annually validating your information. There is a ton of information out there on your customers, and it will tell you what's going on. If all of you remember, Target pulled out of Canada, and it left a huge amount of debt. The companies that were connected to social media and saw the Target announcement, they literally were phoning trucks, shipping merchandise to Target and telling them to turn around and leave, and saving themselves tens of thousands of dollars, because once that merchandise was delivered, it was then dealt with their receivership. Being aware of a company's footprint and current news is important. So let's talk about corporations. Obviously, you're going to get a credit application. Some of you are going to use Dun & Bradstreet or Equifax or Ansonia to look at a company's credit worthiness. But outside of that, you can also look at the digital footprint or paper trail they have created by the years of being in business. If the company has a website, you can go to whois.com. You can see how long that website's been in place. You can see who hosts their website. You often will have contact information for that website, whether it's a hosting company or an IT person in the company, or their actual, the actual owner of the business might manage their website themselves. And there's often contact information. There is a US-based website called Manta. It scrapes or gathers information on businesses in Canada, and it will have years in business, income of the company, key contacts or key personnel. And obviously, if you have money to spend behind paywalls, there's zoominfo.com. ZoomInfo is a huge collection of personnel. It will give you contact names, phone numbers, and email addresses for direct individuals. You can search by name, you can search by title. So if your customers are a large customer, often in collections, getting a hold of the right person is important. And obviously with businesses, key people change. So it's important to be able to search credit manager or VP of finance or CFO. And if it's changed, you now have the current information. With consumers, you can do the same thing with their personal websites. You can look at Facebook and LinkedIn. You need to use this data cautiously. The Privacy Commissioner of Canada has ruled if just because a consumer posts on their Facebook page that's not locked down, here's my phone number, here's my new address, that's not necessarily meant for collection purposes. You can't just use that blindly, but you can view it. You could verify a phone number that you have in place. You could verify an address for having someone served with a small claims court action. You can use some of that information. You can obviously see, Bob Smith posts, just lost my job today, things are really rough. You can see some of that. You can also do targeted Google searches by address to see who owns the property, by a telephone number, because the telephone number these days might not be in that person's name, or it might be a cell phone number that's not published in Canada411.com. You can create Google News alerts. So for example, our company, we're a collection agency. Obviously, people don't always say nice things about us. We've created a Google alert for our company being mentioned in Google News anywhere. We've created alerts for our key clients. So if somebody has a billing complaint for one of our key clients, we find out about it right away. Anybody can sign up for that for free. There's also a paywall option called Spokeo. Spokeo is, again, a US-based website. The concept of privacy in the US very different than in Canada. So if you want to search for John Smith, who lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan, through Spokeo, you can search, you can find a Google Street View of their house, what their house is worth, whether they are a registered Republican or Democrat, the names of their children, the average house value in their property, all their previous addresses. It's creepy. Now, Canadians, when they sign up for things like Twitter and Facebook, they're giving their personal data or their personal PII, their personal information, to US servers. So a lot of Canadians appear on this. So you can search and say, well, here's a link to their Twitter account, and here's their phone number, and so on. So there are a number of functions available through Spokeo. The paywall for Spokeo is not expensive. If you're dealing with a lot of consumers, I highly recommend that as a search. So how does this all apply to collections, which is the whole reason we're here? In the old days, when I first started in collections in the 80s, I went from being a credit manager to a collection agency. And the first collection agency I worked at was horrific. I went into this office and they had these tiny little desks with these burly men smoking and drinking at their desks, yelling into phones, banging phones in garbage cans. It was awful because there were no repercussions. Now, fast forward today, if you have a negative interaction with a consumer, they can go onto your Google business page, give you a 1-star review and say, I talked to the credit manager, John Jones, and he was a horrible human being, and he told me I was going to live in a bus shelter. And it's on your company's personal Google business page, and it affects your reputation forever. And there's nothing you can do about that. Talking about the internet and all these servers, you don't have control over those. You don't have control over who gets to say what about your company. You can be part of the conversation, and there are things you can do, but collection tactics aren't just an isolated world anymore. Your collections impact sales. Your collections impact your brand reputation and marketing. Your collections impact your digital footprint of your company. So it's important that everything you do is transparent. And that anything that you say, do, any email you send, any phone call that you make that might be recorded isn't going to embarrass your company in the long run. So it's a balancing act. Collections, the problem with collections, especially with consumer collections, but commercial as well, is it's a stressful subject. When consumers or businesses owe money, it's not that they want to owe money. They're in over their head. They've had financial hardship happen. They have cash flow issues. They believe the world owes them something and everything revolves around them. They didn't read the contract. They don't understand the consequences. So any conversation you have on collections is an emotionally charged issue, and not everyone's going to take that well. So the important thing is you balance it, is viciously chasing a $90 past due account worth your company's reputation. On the flip side, when you have consequences, are you delivering those consequences with empathy and with forewarning? So when suddenly you cut a customer off from service, or you send them to collections, or you have them served with papers, is it a horrible shock and surprise? Or do they say, I saw this coming. Yes, they gave me every opportunity. You can balance that. So I've always believed in, even back in the 80s when I was calling people with phones bolted to walls, about being kind. You want to get the consequences across, but you want to deliver it in a way that it's not personal. It's not about you. You're using diffusing language. You're giving everyone an off-ramp. You're saying, I could put this on your credit rating, or you can work with me. I can give you until X date before we go to the next step. I am perfectly willing to make arrangements with you to get you back as a customer. Those are the sorts of things that are more important now than ever, because A, you'll recover clients, but B, you'll also get customers that owe you money. Even if they move on to the next consequence, they understand you tried to help them. Now, you will get negative reactions. It's inevitable. But the important thing is minimizing the negative reactions wherever possible. Now, communication channels. Don't we have a poll for communication channels? Awesome. We'll see what the results are on that. So, talking again about collections and how it impacts. In the old days, you had phone and letter mail, and you'd phone people, and the phones were bolted to walls, or they were these Nextel systems that were bolted into the back room with millions of wires. The world has changed. 80% of people under 40 no longer have a landline. Businesses are often relying on VoIP systems, and they're integrated with cell phones, enterprise cell phone systems. The way people answer phones, behavior has changed. Again, if you're getting a call and you don't want to take the call, you swipe right, you turn the phone upside down. Oh, excellent. I see a lot of people. Oh, this was social media. Do we have one for the communication channels? I jumped around. So perfect. So with communication channels, we now have a wealth of options open to us. And depending on your audience, whether it's commercial or consumer, you will get a different reaction. You've got SMS, you've got email, you've got live chat options via website, and you have two-way communication through social media channels. Someone can message you or leave a review on Facebook if you have a business Facebook page. They can message you through your Google Maps page. And the important thing is being able to reach out to consumers through multiple channels, and when they reach out to you, being available through multiple channels. So in sales, okay, about 2 or 3, that's good. With sales, they say try different communications, send an email, then make a call, then try a LinkedIn connection. Collections is exactly like that. Consumers might not respond to a phone call, but they might respond to an SMS. They actually did a study with smartphones. The least used app on a smartphone is the phone. More people are more likely to respond to an SMS or email than they are a telephone call. Allegorically speaking, back in the 80s, I'd phone 100 people a day and I would reach 20. Because 20 people would pick up the phone and I'd leave a message with someone in the household, or I would speak to the consumer directly. Now it's more a case of you call 100 people, 8 people answer the phone. It's far less. And obviously on cell phones, there's an option, mark call as spam, do not call list, what have you. So you can be blocked. Again, if you're not taking an empathetic approach, if you're going in guns blazing, they can simply halt your communication. Consumers have an amazing amount of power. They also have done a study that with an SMS or email, your smartphone starts blinking a little red light. And if you respond to that, you actually get endorphins from responding. Many people feel psychologically compelled to respond to a text or an email. And if we send out a collection notice via email that's empathetic, that has a call to action with a link to a payment website, or a phone number to reach out to, or an email address to reach out to, our response rate is often 1 in 20, or 20 in 100, or 30 in 100. It's far better than what we got with a phone call. Obviously, negotiation, especially on larger balances, can't be dealt with a simple email. But email is a wonderful supplementary function to kicking off a phone call conversation if it's needed. Same thing with SMS. We get about a 20% response rate via SMS. And we get inbound chat requests through Google Business or Facebook at all hours of the day, because that's when consumers are available. So it's important that you have as many channels as possible set up. The other thing that's important, if possible, is tracking things. So you might have an internal contact management system, and it might say XYZ company is always late, or XYZ company has bounced 2 checks on us. Make sure they pay in certified funds or as COD. You also want to have a function in there, XYZ company does not respond to phone calls, does respond to emails. Use email whenever possible. If you can tailor your collection outreach program to what historically has worked with that specific consumer, that will improve your collection rate, your response rate, and consumers will feel better about your company because you're reaching out to them in the method they prefer. If they're getting hounded with phone calls and they never return phone calls, all you're doing is creating more stress for no return of revenue. But if you suddenly switch to email and they start having an email conversation with you, great. You want to be able to track that. So let's talk about social media. So every company is involved in social media, whether they like it or not. You and your company and your employees are likely on LinkedIn. You can be named on Twitter or Facebook. Instagram and TikTok, I'm old, I don't understand these, but I do understand they have a role in the business world. There are online consumer forums like 800notes.com. You can search for a phone number and you'll have consumers saying, yes, I got a call from them. They tried to collect money from me. You've got your Google Business Maps and your Google Business Reviews. Social media is anything that's social, where 2 or more people can have a conversation, either as a community or a two-way conversation that's public. And you're involved in social media, whether you like it or not. So going back to the original, have you Googled yourself? You should see what's going on. Now, some of you probably use collection agencies. I can tell you that most collection agencies are a barren wasteland of 1-star reviews. Those horrible human beings, they called me, they told me we owed money. So way back, I started a blog to try to push all the stuff about my company, about me personally, all the bad reviews to page 3 of Google. That's not what happened. I was very fortunate. I lucked into understanding how social media works. So I started posting consumer awareness articles. No, a collection agency can't sue you for $50. Here's the statute of limitations in Alberta. This is what a company should do for collections. This is how they can treat people with empathy. Suddenly, I had clients, and back in 2011, we were a small company. I had clients calling me from all over Canada. I love your blog. How much business would you like? Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So we started growing. And then later we started having consumers calling, yeah, I got a call from you. I was really scared about collections, but then I Googled your company and your name, and you seem like decent human beings. How can I work this out? Being part of the conversation doesn't necessarily mean you can control the conversation. You can't stop people from saying negative things about collections. You can't stop people from reacting negatively, but you can have the good conversation in there. And if you put effort into social media, you can have a conversation. Most people on social media are speaking out positively or negatively because they want to be heard. I don't know if you guys remember United Air. They deplaned a person a number of years ago, and somebody with a cell phone caught it. That cost United Air billions of dollars, and that was a social media snafu. That's a perfect, Merriam-Webster got on Twitter and said, volunteer means somebody doing something that they're not forced to do. Like they were being trolled by tens of thousands of people. Shareholders lost confidence in United Air. People dumped their stocks. They lost billions of dollars because one person with a cell phone had access to social media. If they had just shared that video amongst their circle of friends sitting on the plane, nothing would have happened. But they suddenly had on YouTube access to millions of people. And that's exactly, obviously, the people attending this seminar, we're not dealing with billions of dollars and millions of people in an audience, but to a same scale to our companies, it can affect us. So one of the things that we did, we've been very fortunate. Our collection agency has a 4.3 star Google rating on Google Business. And we've encouraged consumers and businesses to leave us positive reviews. And what's happened by doing that, we still get negative reviews, but they're 1/4 of our reviews. So somebody who goes to look at us, the good outweighs the bad, and those people are not damaging our reputation. And we've refined our social media process over time. So about 6 months ago, I had to go to the dentist. Went to the dentist. I left the dentist. As I was leaving the dentist, I got a text on my cell phone because the dentist had my cell phone number. How was your visit to the dentist? Here's a link to our Google Business page. That's a great option. Back in the 80s, we would collect money from people and we'd be reasonable with people. And I would get Christmas cards with post-dated checks and this lovely note, thank you for being so kind and reasonable. Collections doesn't have to be negative. Often a consumer is stressed or a business is having cash flow issues. And if you negotiate with them to build a win-win scenario where they remain a customer or they resolve their debt and they avoid having an item put on their credit bureau, there's this huge rush of relief. Oh, I'm so glad that's done with. You can capture that positive reaction in the moment. So one of the things our collection management system does over the last 6 months is the minute one of our collector posts a payment, it asks the collector, do you want to send this person a text asking them if they'd like a Google review, to give us a Google review? And the collector goes, oh, yes, that was a perfectly painless conversation. Let's send them a link. And we've gone to about 3 positive reviews a week. For a collection agency, that's awesome. You as original creditors have an easier battle than we do. You can capture that same social media environment where if somebody goes to collections and you help them solve it and they're relieved to still be a customer, you can ask them to go to Google and leave you a positive review, or go to Facebook and leave you a positive review, or write you a testimonial letter. It's important to capture the positive reactions when they do happen, because they do happen in collections. Not every customer will respond that way. I believe our response rate to requests for Google reviews is 1 in 5,000. But 1 in 5,000 is still excellent. The other thing that you need to do, you need to be part of the conversation. You will get negative reviews. And again, these people just want to be heard. Sometimes you just need to let that person know you heard their concerns And you can, if you go onto our company website, Kingston Data Credit, read through our negative reviews. We've responded to every review, positive or negative. And often it's, I'm sorry you feel that way. Here's the number for our consumer ombudsman. Please reach out to us. You can't have a conversation about personal information on the internet, but you can address issues in a general term. Well, Susan, I see that you had a complaint. I looked up your file and it looks like you called in and dealt with Beth today and she solved everything. If you need anything further, please reach out to us. That sort of response shows that you care and you're listening to the conversation and you're willing to be part of the conversation of your company. And again, the positive responses, Mary, so pleased we could resolve this stressful issue for you. We're glad to have you as a customer. If you need anything, reach out. You make that individual customer feel better. People who search for your company will feel better about you. And everybody can see that you're a socially responsible company in a public forum. And you need to understand that things like Google Business or LinkedIn or Facebook have a huge audience. Our Google Business page was viewed 14,000 times last month. Not all those people called in, but there are people looking at you. And if you set up Google alerts on your Google Business, you can see how big your audience is. So to survive social media and not being a United Airlines kind of scenario, if you look at KFC, so KFC in England, they ran out of chicken, which is of course the worst thing for KFC to do. What they did is they switched suppliers or shipment companies, and suddenly chicken stopped showing up at their stores. Rather than being United Airlines, they set up their social media. They made fun of themselves. They were depreciating. They apologized. By doing that, they made themselves human. They made themselves approachable, and the whole issue blew over within 3 weeks. And they probably gained brand loyalty because they weren't defensive. They didn't stick their head in the sand. They owned their own problems, and they had a joke at their own expense. Now, collections is often very serious, and it should be. But you can certainly, if you're wrong, apologize. If you need to point someone and say, well, these aren't the rules we live by. We're governed by the CRTC or the Collection Act of Ontario. Or you can point people to an authority figure. You can back up your claim without hurting your sense of authority. And you can have a laugh. When I was doing collections over the years, I'd get at the end of the call, well, please don't take this the wrong way with Mr. Wetlaufer, but I hope I never hear from you again. And we'd have a good laugh about that. You can have some sense of humor or some sense of empathy by joking about somebody mangling your name, or they don't want to be in collections again, or what have you. If there's an opportunity to create an emotional bond through humor, you should. And the last slide I have, give me a second here. I am very fortunate. When we started our company, I just wanted to fix my personal reputation. I was fortunate. There was a fellow named Paul Nazareth who came to a breakfast networking event in Kitchener, and he got up and he talked about a book called Unmarketing that was written by a Canadian called Scott Stratton, who does marketing. And he made a huge difference talking about how people behave on social media, how companies can affect their reputation. And we changed our social media strategy, our marketing strategy, based on Scott Stratton's books. He has a number of books, and he's a brilliant fellow. If you ever get a chance to see him speak in person, he looks like a heavy metal drummer with a ponytail and a black t-shirt. But he does marketing for large companies, and he talks about creating that sense of humanness, creating that sense of accessibility, creating that sense of owning problems and solving problems. And we've adapted that, and we've been very fortunate. A lot of the people in the collection industry, in collection agency industry, think what we're doing is crazy. But we've grown about 50% a year for the last 10 years. And we have more work than we know what to do with. And we've done that by being accessible, by being human, by having a sense of empathy, by being engaged on social media. Those are the things that make a difference. Because we live in a world where we've gone from buyer beware to consumer beware. The consumers in this day and age know more about your company than you do because they've Googled it, they've searched it, they know more about your product. They've searched, the Amazon reviews, they've searched, the manufacturer. Consumers hold power, and an angry consumer backed into a corner has a lot of power to harm your long-term reputation. So the important thing is knowing how to manage the conversation, knowing how to approach a person for collections, knowing when to push, when not to push, and knowing if things do blow up, how to respond to it. Collections is still about demanding money. It's still about consequences. It's still about deadlines. None of that has changed. But the important thing is you're doing collections in front of an audience if you're not careful. So you need to be prepared to answer to the audience. And that's where things have changed. And I'm wordy and opinionated, and I have a blog called receivablesaccounts.com where I talk about social media and collection techniques and key phrases to use and not use and sample emails and letters. And I'm happy to share any of that. And I believe that if we all work towards being professional and modern and using modern tools, we make our industry better, we make collections better and more reputable, and we build a better world for all of us. And that's my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Anyone?
If you do have any questions, you can use the chat function, or you can even raise your hand and I can unmute you if you would like. Oh, we do have one. Okay, Darcy.
Darcy, go ahead.
So one of the questions I had written down prior to your indicating that there's nothing you can do. How do we alter or delete vindictive reviews? I'm a little older than you and been doing what I've been doing for 40 years, and the whole social media, like I had no idea what effect the negative. In fact, the only reviews I had initially, probably 4 years ago, were 2 negative clients, and one of them actually recorded 3 negative reviews. So it was the husband under one name, the wife under another, and a sister-in-law, and they all wrote terrible reviews. And I'm at, and you're saying there's nothing I can do. Terribly unfair.
There's not a lot you can do. So actually, I have a very similar situation. 2 months ago, we contacted a consumer. They're irrational, and they have set up 8 different Google accounts to leave us 8 negative reviews. Now, on Google Business, there's an option to flag reviews as spam. Of the 8 negative reviews, I got 4 removed. 4 they refused to remove. But what you can do is you respond to each one of them, and I responded. I see this is a repeat complaint from this customer. We've already addressed this. If you want to reach out to us, we're happy to do so. But the ultimate solution is burying those negative reviews with positive reviews. If I have like 408 reviews, so those 4 negative reviews are going to be lost in the mountain of positive reviews. The best thing you can do is have constant reviews coming in. And those like, if all you have is 2 negative reviews and those 2 are all you have, yes, that's awful. If you have 400 reviews and only 2 are negative, no one will care. So you want to respond to those negative reviews and say, I see this as a duplicate complaint. And you ultimately, on a go forward basis, you want to respond to those complaints quickly, like within a week. But the ultimate solution is get the good news out there to drown out the bad news. You can't stop Google just is when you are on a platform like Google Business, you live by their rules and you live by their arbitrary decisions of whether a review stays or not. You can flag it and ask it to be removed. You can appeal it, but ultimately Google gets the say, not you. So the important thing is respond to it and get other reviews to drown it out.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm learning, and you know, one of the last things we're doing is saying, you know, if you have a moment over the next week, please visit our webpage and leave us. And I don't tell them what to write, of course. I just say, please leave us a review.
Yeah, and that's what we do. Our text says, you know, we're pleased that you've resolved your account, so we're capitalizing on a positive experience. How did we treat you? You know, please feel free to leave a review at this Google link. You know, we have g.page/Kingston DC. Please feel free to leave us a review if you feel so inclined. No pressure. We don't tell them what to write. And you know, sometimes, you know, 1 in 10 it backfires. Well, I got this call and I shouldn't have been sent to collections and I'm really upset. But 9 times out of 10, when we get a review, yeah, I talked to Megan. She was more than reasonable with me. Thank you so much for working with me. And we tell our staff that, you know, we're doing this, and we give them control over it so they can pick and choose. Because if you have somebody doing your collection functions internally, they'll know if, well, this account was like pulling teeth and they were angry the whole time, maybe we shouldn't ask them for a review. And we let them control who they get to ask reviews from.
Yeah, that's somewhat helpful. Again, you know, just trying to wade through all of the do's and don'ts, and things really need to become habit. And you know, it's like when someone calls, where are you getting our name from? Because that's so critical in terms of the overall approach.
Totally.
Yeah. Thanks.
No problem. Anyone else?
I'm not seeing any more questions, but perhaps you can let us know what your biggest piece of advice to take away from this presentation would be.
The important thing about collections is no matter what happens with what new tools coming available or new consumer behaviors, the act of collections, whether it's dealing with a company or an individual, is a human interaction. Human beings are making decisions of whether to pay or not. Human beings are making decisions that get them into trouble that end up in collections. The important thing is whether you're sending a text or an email or dealing with Google, just understand there's a human being on the other side, and try to put yourself in their shoes whenever possible. Try to deal with them how you would like to be dealt with whenever possible. Use empathy with it whenever possible, and you know, try to make it as painless a conversation as possible.
That's fantastic. I'm not seeing any other questions, but I think you said previously that if there are any other questions that they can reach out to you. So that's fantastic.
Yep, they can reach out to me through my blog at any point, and I'm happy to share what I've learned through trial and error.
Fantastic. Well, I just wanted to take the time to thank you on behalf of the Chamber for your presentation today. Thank you all for attending and for MNP for sponsoring today's event. Please note that if you do want to review any of the information shared today, it will be available online on our YouTube channel, so you can always go over there and check it out. But thank you so much again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.